What's shakin' bacons? Today I wanted to do a slightly different video because I wanted to talk about something that I actually find very interesting. I've never talked about this on my channel before, and the only reason I'm really putting it out there now is because I haven't seen anything about this when I quickly Googled it, and in case someone else is going through the same thing or experienced the same thing, I would be really interested to know if there was some type of correlation. I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a doctor. I just want to say that right off the bat because I'm talking about some health related things. I just think this is very interesting. This is going to be a story of my personal experience with two health related items. So if you're interested, you can stay tuned. If not, you can click off. That's totally fine. Again, I just thought it was very interesting and I'm putting it out there in case there is anyone who wants to recognize if there's a pattern, or I think it'll be really interesting data to be analyzed as a study or something, not me alone, but it'd be interesting if this was actually a trend or a pattern.
Nerd alert!
I wanted to share a personal story about allergies and about keto. Back in 2010, I was a really healthy person. I was at my optimal body weight. I was running every day. I lived on Guam, and it's a very tropical environment. There's a lot of outdoor activities like snorkeling and hiking and spelunking, and there's really no good reason to stay inside when you're out there because there's so much to do and it's so beautiful. So I was outside, I was very active. Like I said, I ran every day, I lifted weights every day, and I did yoga almost every day because I made the time to do it, and I had the time to do it. I was in college at the time. That was probably one of the healthiest times of my life. At the end of 2010, I graduated with my bachelor's degree because I was out there for university. I was going to the University of Guam. I moved back to the continental US in December 2010 after I graduated. In early 2011, I developed a severe kidney infection. And it was actually so severe that the hospital I ended up going to at the time mentioned that they'd never seen a kidney infection as bad as what I had. I guess I had had it and I hadn't realized I was sick. I didn't realize how sick I was until the person I was dating at the time noticed I was acting oddly and I was complaining that my bones hurt. He asked me a couple questions and I didn't know who the current president was and I didn't know what year it was. He rushed me to the ER and they were like, holy crap, you have this really terrible kidney infection. Here's a lot of antibiotics. Hopefully that'll clear things up. After the antibiotics were done, I was tested. I didn't have the infection anymore. Everything seemed like it was good. In theory, on paper, I should have been fine again, back to my healthy self. But even after the course of antibiotics was finished, I still felt weird. And there was something wrong with my legs. My legs no longer supported me. I couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't run anymore. I would try and stand up from my desk and I would fall down because my legs just refused to take any of my weight. If I had to go upstairs, I ended up having to crawl upstairs on my hands and knees. It was a very, very tough time. I started feeling weird, not just in my legs. I began having difficulty sleeping. I felt tired no matter how much sleep I got, no matter what was going on. I was just very run down. I didn't have the energy to really do much of anything. My legs weren't supporting me. And I ended up going to doctors and physical therapists and osteopathic massage therapy. And I was put on medication, I was put on supplements, and nothing helped. My health just continued to get worse and worse and worse. And because my legs couldn't support me and I had no energy, I couldn't exercise really. So I put on a lot of weight despite my best efforts to diet and watch what I was eating. I just ended up gaining weight and my health just continued to downward spiral. Fast forward to 2017, my health just continued to get increasingly worse. I had skin issues. I was getting migraines daily. I was constantly tired, having problems sleeping. I developed TMD from stress and anxiety. My stomach always hurt. Every part of me ached. Sometimes it was hard for me to stand up straight. I was going to the chiropractor and that helped a little bit. I ended up developing almost debilitating wrist and elbow pain. I used to have an almost photographic memory, and it seemed like I couldn't even remember basic words. Like I would go to say something and nothing would come out of my mouth. It was as though I was operating in a total fog. I was also getting constant infections over small things. Like even if I got a paper cut or a hangnail, it would immediately puff up and be infected for some reason. And I started becoming what seemed like sensitive to everything. Things that never used to bother me, like certain types of soap or certain kinds of toothpaste or hand lotion, started to give me extreme allergic reactions. I started getting some other symptoms, which I'm not going to describe as they're of a rather delicate nature. Nobody needs to hear about that stuff. My health just went into this free fall. It seemed like it was just snowballing since I had had that kidney infection and I had been tested. You know, I didn't still have an infection. I didn't have Lyme disease. I didn't have diabetes. I didn't have anemia. I had been tested for a lot of stuff and no one could figure out what the problem was. By the time it was November 2017, I was taking over-the-counter pain medicine like ibuprofen and naproxen and Tylenol multiple times every day just to try and get through the day and try and cope. And it really was me trying to get through one day at a time because I could not think, I couldn't function. And I remember in November, I stumbled out of the closet in our bedroom and I had been trying to get dressed and I was all bent over and I couldn't straighten myself up. And I remember I was walking and my foot was like cocked in. I was just limping, half bent over with my legs all seized up. Couldn't get dressed because my body had just quit on me. And I remember I just kind of stumbled out of the closet and I felt broken and defeated. And I just stood there like bent over crying because all I could think of was how I used to just put on my shoes and go out and go running underneath the banana trees and the palm trees on Guam, and how healthy and happy I used to be. I couldn't believe that I was no longer that person. And I remember telling my husband, I was like, I feel like my body hit its warranty years ago and I am just going downhill. 2 weeks later, I happened to have a physical schedule, just a yearly physical, and I was diagnosed with a gluten allergy. My mind kind of blew. I'm ashamed to admit I was one of those people that just thought it was a fad. I didn't really know what it was. I had never looked into it. I never had a need to look into it, or at least I didn't know that I had a need to look into it. I was very ignorant on the subject. I thought it was like a diet trend. I got diagnosed and I did my research and I looked into it. And normally if you're feeling sick or you think there might be something wrong with you, you know, you'll Google it and you may have one or two symptoms of whatever it is the doctor thinks you might have. Like maybe if you have a cold, you know, you're kind of sniffly and you have a cough. You don't normally have every single symptom of a sickness. I finally did research and looked up gluten allergies after I was diagnosed by my doctor, and I had every single one of a gluten allergy symptom. Every single friggin' one. There was not one symptom I did not have. My mind was just absolutely blown. Obviously, I immediately stopped intaking anything with gluten, which is not easy, I might add, because gluten's in stuff that you wouldn't even think it would be in. Like, I can't take Tylenol anymore because Tylenol and acetaminophen pills contain gluten filler. It's in stuff you would have no idea or even think that it could possibly be in.
That's what she said!
And for example, I can't wear lipstick anymore, or certain types of lipstick, because some makeup also has gluten fillers, and if I wear lipstick and I lick my lips, I ingest it and I have a reaction. I was diagnosed with this, immediately stopped all intake of gluten. Every single health issue I had just gone. Within about 2 weeks, I would say my system had mostly purged the primary amount of gluten that had been in it, because like I said, it's in stuff you wouldn't think. And I was eating healthily. I was trying to maintain my weight, but it's in stuff that you're not aware of. Like it was in my protein bars, and it was in the powdered drink mix that my husband and I used to make for each other. It was in almost everything. Every health issue I had went away, and it still amazes me because I am back to being a normal health. And the reason why it had never been diagnosed before, for those of you that are like, well, WTF, why didn't your doctors figure that out? I have lived such a transient lifestyle. I have lived in a lot of different states. I have lived overseas. I have never lived anywhere as long as I have lived where I am now. Or when you're in a place for such a short amount of time, it's easy for a doctor not to be able to spot a trend in a long-term progression of health decline, particularly when, as you're going through a health decline, you kind of get used to the pain because it's a daily thing, and you just learn to kind of live with it. It just becomes part of your life. And then later on, when it's pointed out to you that it's not normal, you're kind of shaken. And you're like, not everybody has this problem? That was why I had never been diagnosed. The current doctor finally put 2 and 2 together and was like, dude, this is what's wrong. And that was in fact what's wrong. Immediately my health changed, and it's been life-changing. I miss the freedom that came with gluten. Like, I used to be a big craft beer person, and I used to love pizza, and I used to love eating all these different kinds of foods. Like, I miss bread. In the end, it ended up being, do I want to have bread now and then and a beer now and then, or would I rather essentially save my life and my health? And the reason why my health had gone so downhill is because my body was in such a prolonged, constant state of immune inflammation that the longer it goes on, the weaker your body's immune system becomes, and it just starts constantly attacking itself and tearing itself down. And the funny thing that I learned, because I thought, how come I didn't have so many issues before I moved back from Guam? It turns out a full-blown gluten allergy or another full-blown severe allergy can be fully triggered if it was laying dormant by a bad infection. I had gotten this severe kidney infection, and it was the trigger to fully set off this full-blown allergy within my system. So why am I talking about this? When I stopped eating any kind of gluten, I went through what is known as gluten withdrawal. I'm not going to go into any of the science behind this. If you're interested, you can read. There's a lot of medical studies and papers done on this. You know, 2 famous ones are Grain Brain by David Perlmutter and Wheat Belly by William Davis. Gluten has been proven to be an addictive substance. And again, if you're interested in this, there's a lot of great documentaries you can watch that are very interesting. There's a lot of books and articles, and there's other YouTube videos that you can watch on this topic. This video is not about that. I went through gluten withdrawal. What you get is something that's very similar to the flu because gluten is an addictive substance to your body. It actually goes through your blood-brain membrane, and it has an impact on you, and it can make you have crazy cravings. You go through irritability, you get anxiety, brain fog, you get dizzy and lightheaded, you get all the flu-like symptoms where you're achy, you're extremely tired, you feel sick. You know, there's a host of other symptoms that you go through. I gave myself about 2 months to get on a gluten-free diet and heal my metabolism. After that, I had had a lot of things pointing me toward keto. Now, I know a lot of people, just like I used to look at gluten and like I used to look at keto, look at it as a dietary fad. I am very, at this point, trepidatious about what I put into my body because I became so affected by this allergy that I have, and because I became so affected by a lot of other things prior to the allergy being diagnosed that my body became sensitive to. So I did my full research on keto, and it is actually scientifically backed. It is safe. And there were some articles and news items recently about how it's like the worst diet. What's interesting is if you actually trace the grants back that funded those studies and those dietary recommendations, They were all funded by like the Weight Association of America and companies that actually have ties to that industry. So I just, as a quick side note, if you're ever doing research about anything health related, or if you see articles about different health items, first of all, make sure it's not fake news. Everyone's talking about fake news. There is a lot of misinformation on the internet. Secondly, it is always important to look at any kind of bias when you are doing research or when you are trying to teach yourself or learn about something, because bias, especially in studies or in politics or when it comes to big business, has a very large influence and is a very big indicator of the reliability and how you should evaluate information. So that's just a quick side note, and I recommend doing that for everything. Investigate bias, investigate where something came from. But that's off topic.
Nerd alert!
So I did my research on this. It is scientifically backed by studies throughout the years, and it's become more popular recently. And the reason why keto is, it works where things like Atkins or normal low carb diets don't work, or only work in a short term, is because other low carb diets focus on high protein. If you have low carb and you have high protein intake, your body goes through a process called gluconeogenesis, and I may have mispronounced that, but essentially what happens is your body sees that it's not getting glucose from carb intake, so it converts protein intake to glucose. So people that do low carb diets that do not adequately restrict the amount of protein that they intake don't ever fully convert their body to processing ketones instead of glucose. And when you get your body to process ketones, your body straight starts processing any fat reserves on you. As I mentioned, I had gained a lot of weight over the years. You can even look back a couple videos ago, back to December, before I started really managing my weight, and you can see that I definitely was heavier and I looked different. I was puffier. So I decided I was going to start doing keto. Husband decided he was going to start doing it with me. You know, we both had some subcutaneous fat that we wanted to lose, and he wanted to support me. He does not have a gluten allergy. He did not give up gluten. The only times he ate gluten-free were when we had dinner together. Otherwise, he had it at lunch. He had it in snacks. You know, it's not a health concern for him. I was reading about the keto flu, which is something that you go through when you go through carb withdrawal. And looks like the symptoms of keto flu are irritability, anxiety, brain fog, extreme fatigue, flu-like symptoms, lightheadedness, you feel achy, and I can go on. It's like, wait a minute. Didn't I just go through that when I went through gluten withdrawal? And I thought, that's really interesting. I wonder if gluten withdrawal is actually the reason for keto flu. And it's actually the withdrawal because in keto you don't really eat much that has gluten in it because you're eating a lot of natural vegetables, you're eating meats, you're eating healthy fats like butter and avocados and nuts. You're not really intaking things with a lot of fillers in them, or at least you're not supposed to be. I thought, I wonder if the keto flu is actually gluten withdrawal. Before we started it, I told my husband this, and I said, let's just see if my theory is correct. Let's just see if I get the keto flu or not. We both start it. Day 3, husband gets hit big time with keto flu. He was so tired, he could not physically get himself to get out of bed. He was snappy over everything. Like, I would breathe and he'd be like, He had headaches. He started getting anxiety. He didn't feel well. He felt sick to his stomach. He didn't want to eat anything. Like, he had full on straight up keto flu, and it lasted for about 3 days. And by day 6, he was normal again, felt better than he had before. He had gone through the keto flu. His body had started to kick in, start burning ketones efficiently, and he was fine. His withdrawal period had ended. I started at the same time. I hit day 3. Keto flu was supposed to start around day 3. I was already in ketosis. Normally, it takes about 1 to 2 weeks for your body to hit ketosis after you go through its reserve of glycogen. Day 3, when you're out of your glycogen, that's when the keto flu hits. And it usually lasts between 3 to 5 days. About a week to 2 weeks, you'll notice that you're in ketosis, and you can test it using urine strips, or you can test your blood, or there's very obvious physical signs that you're in ketosis. For me, day 3, I was in ketosis. I had no withdrawal, I had no symptoms, other than I was slightly fatigued on day 2, but I also don't get a lot of sleep because I'm very busy, so it could just be normal sleeplessness. I was immediately in ketosis, I had no ill effects, and by day 3, I felt fantastic. I have not felt this good since I lived in Guam. And I felt great when I gave up gluten, and now that I am feeding my body healthy fuel for it to run on, I feel absolutely fantastic, and I've started losing weight, and it's not water weight. That's another thing that I noticed. My husband lost weight at first, but his body fat percentage did not drop because a lot of it was water weight. I lost a lot at first. I lost at least 10 pounds the first month of doing it, and my body fat percentage dropped with it. It was not water weight, it was straight up body fat that was dropping on me. And I just thought that's really interesting. I did not get the keto flu, and I am pretty certain that it is because it's not actually keto flu or carb withdrawal. I think it's because it's gluten withdrawal. And I may be the only person who finds this interesting, but I wanted to share that because it was such an intriguing thing to experience. I wish I hadn't had to experience it because I miss pizza and beer. I mean, I get steak and stuff now, so it's totally fine. You know, I get to actually cook with butter again, and I'm dropping weight. My blood pressure is super low. My cholesterol is very good levels considering where I was. It's been great, and I just thought it was very interesting, and I wanted to share it in case A, there was someone else who's in a similar position, and B, in case somebody is noticing a correlation. Maybe you're a grad student or somebody is studying and you are hypothesizing different data. This is very interesting. I think it would be really cool to see if there was a correlation. Based on my experience, and like I said, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I can't speak for anyone else, but based on my experience, I personally surmise that they are the same. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I also wrote a little article about this. It's a little more in-depth for STEEMIT, so if you guys want to see that, you can check it out. And I hope you're having a great week. I know this is kind of different than normal, and when I say kind of, I mean it's really different than normal, because normal I'm like Star Wars, gaming, movies. I just thought this was really interesting, and I wanted to just share this for anyone who would find it as interesting as I did. You guys have a great week, and I will catch you later.